Good evening. This meeting of May 20th, 2019 of the Dubuque Community School District Board of Education is called to order. Our mission is to develop world-class learners and citizens of character in a safe and inclusive learning community. Roll call, please.
Mr. Barton.
Here.
Ms. Bradley.
Here.
Mr. Donahue.
Here.
Mr. Prohaska. Ms. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Sansey.
Here.
Ms. Whitman.
Here.
I move the Board of Education approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve the agenda as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
I move the Board of Education expel student number 805666 from attending school in the Dubuque Community School District through January 20th, 2020, pursuant to waiver of hearing signed on May 17th, 2019.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education expel student number 805666 from attending school in the Dubuque Community School District through January 20th, 2020, pursuant to waiver of hearing signed on May 17th, 2019. Is there any discussion?
So following our protocol, this is a student, quite honestly, it's strike 3 in a very short amount of time, but a younger student, and so instead of expelling for an entire year, it was worked with the parents to develop a contract and some things that she will do during that first semester next year to some community service, a variety of other options there to put her in a better spot to be more successful in her schools when she comes back at semester. And if she's diligent with it, she will still maintain traction to be able to graduate on time.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, that takes us into our district strategic plan review, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Reingans.
Okay, well, thank you. It's hard for me to believe, even though it's been kind of a crazy year with the weather and everything, that here we sit towards the end of May, talking about the strategic plan, or more specifically the priority initiatives within the strategic plan. So as you know, two-part meeting. The first part is sort of the wrap-up from this year, what our priority initiatives were and where we're at currently. I know we've discussed these many times at great length, so I will move at a pace to explain where we're at currently, but don't take that as an indication that feel free to ask questions either as we go or at the end. And then the second portion of the meeting will be the priority initiatives that have been established or being proposed for next year. Of course, those are in draft format so that the board has a chance for input if they so desire. And that one we spent a little bit more time with getting input on. So anyway, we will look at the 18-19 priority initiatives. Again, the key is check mark means it's completed, kind of a one and done thing. The new icon we came up with was the circle inside of the green, because that means it's operational, because many of these things we don't do and then forget about. We've ingrained those into the system. The significant progress, steady progress, some progress. Sorry, I gotta turn my phone off. And then an X if it's canceled. If we could take a 2-second break. This is my daughter calling. I know she's on the road, and so I just want to make sure that all is okay. Hello.
So I'd like to, yeah, we got to pause Paradise by the Dashboard Lights. I'd like to discuss our approval system for the agenda again over the next 30 seconds or so. Okay, let's see. Never mind.
Like to reopen that for a little while? Okay. Let's just reflect.
That was probably, okay, back to you, Stan.
Twice, which is unusual. She's on her way back from Iowa City. Said, "Oh boy,
That's what dads do.
my luck. Nobody's answering the phone, and she's sitting with a flat tire or something."
Bill was ready to jump in.
Okay. Yes. Well, I'm glad he didn't start, because I won't be able to get started.
It is a real good thing.
Is Phil here? I saw Kevin down there. I didn't see Phil.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so I'll go through these. Again, many of the talking points are ones that we've discussed, but don't let me go too fast if you have questions. study current practices in the statewide voluntary preschool program and create an action plan to begin the 1920 school year. So that plan is just wrapping up. As you know, we have a new director this year, and she has done a great job of putting, with support and help from both Cindy and the preschool directors, that plan. That will be coming to, it is a check, or it's operational because we'll systematize that. That will come to the Ed Program Subcommittee in a couple of weeks in June. So you'll see that plan as it goes, but just based on the timing, we're calling it organizational at this point because the plan is finalizing itself, or will finalize itself when the board sees that here in 2 weeks. Support schools and identifying individual school instructional focus areas. And so that was a plan that we developed, or an initiative a year ago, and then the state sort of stepped in with the whole ESSA planning process, which kind of mirrored that pretty well. And so each building has gone through that planning process, whether they were required to or not, as schools that were comprehensive or targeted needed to, but other schools did as well. So it's still in the process of that. The timeline with that takes them a little bit longer, and we'll carry that forward and can finalize that next year. We had some other things that unfortunately fell through. We did have a grant that we were targeting for Audubon for a STEM-focused grant. Some of you maybe saw that through the governor's work around STEM. Unfortunately, Audubon was not selected as one of the schools to be funded for that. But we'll continue that process to give our buildings those opportunities.
Is it something that they reapply for?
We don't know. So we don't know if so it's kind of a pilot grant that the state had.
Okay.
So whether this specific grant will exist or not is probably not for a year. As they, I can't remember how many, Cindy, do you remember how many they picked, or Mike? Is it 10? It was a small number statewide. Was it 5? And then there weren't any UENs represented in that group. We were a little surprised at that or disappointed in that. But we'll continue to look for other types of grants like that. They certainly have the, buildings have the interest in following that.
In terms of that one, did that or does that mean that schools are looking at, I know in the past we've talked some about magnet schools. Is that not the intention of this?
So they're looking at a variety of things that they can do, and the reason you see that the half purple circle is
Right.
because, again, we're not as far as we'd like to be. So it can be, as they work through their plans, a variety of different, so maybe it's just a focus on a specific area, or it could be something as large as a STEM focus,
Okay, so a range.
type of a range of things. yeah.
Okay.
Revised district safety training to include clear and consistent reinforcement of reporting concerns. So again, that's we've done a lot of training around that. The see something, say something conversation that we've had. We've done the training. I think you're starting to see nationally that the schools, unfortunately, incidents continue to happen, but students and staff, unfortunately or fortunately, more prepared to deal with them. I think they understand the outcome, they understand what their response can be, and people are taking the right, unfortunately, but they're taking the right steps to do that, and they're limiting the tragedy that could happen from that. Review state and district high school graduation requirements and develop an action plan for allowing greater student choice in their education. So that is in progress. Again, Mark has worked with his group around the portrait of a graduate and looking at what it is that we want our students to have as a skill set when they graduate. So that's sort of step one. Now we're also going to talk next year about what the teachers need to do to get them there, and then what needs to change within the course guide requirements to ensure that we get them there. How much, and where it gets a little, where the conversation will be interesting or difficult is when we talk about choice versus what they're mandated to take. But we're moving through that process, but the next step has to be, what do we need from our staff? And that really kicks it from just a secondary, because not a secondary issue, it's a K-12, pre-K-12 issue, into a larger committee to talk about what do we need at the elementary level to prepare the growth of our students for that type of coursework. enhance relationships with outside agencies focused on restorative strategies, mentoring, and tutoring. So 13 students have now gone through the Restorative Strategies program with a review of initial cases underway to continue strengthening the program and enhancing its effectiveness. So that's the idea of when a student finds himself in trouble or finding themselves in a need to return to school, what is it that we do to help them be successful? It's kind of what I'm talking about when we do some of these short-term expulsions. You know, we don't just say go away and come back. We say what are we going to work on? You know, the volunteering in the community, those types of things to kind of help them see, you know, different skill sets that they might have and help them be more successful students. And so we have 13 students who have gone through that, and there's some level of peer input on that as well as mentoring. The district currently has 294 mentors actively engaged in our schools. So that gives you an idea of the size of the sort of connection we're trying to build with our students. Number 6, systematize the recruitment of students into courses that provide a college career experience with specific emphasis on removing barriers for underrepresented populations. So again, what are we doing with our course guide, our relationship between guidance counselors and students and parents, the 4-year plans that they established to make sure that students understand the variety of the coursework that's available to them. So high schools continue to partner with area agencies to present high school CTE experiences that could lead to concurrent classes. You'll see some of that on our next year's rendition. Number of students enrolled in internship courses has doubled from the 1920 school year, and so again that talks about the college career ready piece. And then late legislative action by the state regarding the financial literacy requirement hampered some of our work in that area because the students who all of a sudden they had this one requirement that they had to take next year, well now they've pushed that back a year. So as we reopen some of the registration opportunities, more students will select that type of coursework.
Is there any data on the underrepresented populations in terms of we've been able to increase that?
So that's where the sticking point is, because we told all the seniors you had to take this financial literacy class as incoming freshmen, and then the state last year said no, that next year they had to take it. And so that bill was just signed, I believe, a week or so ago. And so now we've gone back to those students and said, okay, now re-register. You can take that course, but you don't have to, so you can take these other ones. So we're waiting for the impact, because that is all of the seniors now can select another course. So we'll have that course data, but we don't the way we normally would, because they're re-registering based on the fact that they don't have to take the financial literacy course. Does that make sense?
I don't know, it could just be me. I'm looking.
So-
I get but how's that the emphasis on the underrepresented population?
So all of our students signed up, were forced to sign up next year. So this is looking at registration material for next year.
Okay.
So the goal was to develop that so that when they register for courses for next year, that they would register into this type of coursework.
Oh, okay.
Then the state came in and said, no, you have to take financial literacy. So we took away one of their choices and said, no, you have to take financial literacy.
But now we're
saying now you don't have to, because that's not a requirement yet. So those students are re-registering for courses.
Yep.
And so we don't know how many of them, now they don't have that requirement, will choose one of these courses. So we'll pull that data pretty quickly, but it's kind of in flux in a way. Normally we would know that by January, because we use that for staffing purposes. So it's kind of a late jump for us too, because it could have staffing implications for us.
So when will the requirement begin then?
So it begins, so they pushed it back a year.
A year.
So not next year's graduates, but the following year's graduates, which isn't as,
2021
yes.
graduates.
Yes. And we had already passed ahead of the state for the 22 graduates to have it. So those kids will have that baked into
in the
their
works.
courses for 4 years. It was this last minute, next year seniors, you have to take this class, that said, well, that's one of your 7 choices, so we're making that choice for you. Now that we're saying that's coming off of there, students can choose other classes. So until we know what they've chosen, we won't be able to give you that data. But we should have that soon because we've got to figure out if there's any staffing implications to that.
So the number of students enrolled in internship courses has doubled.
Correct.
From what to what?
So we're at about 50.
40. We were about 20 last year, 17, 20
Okay.
for this current year.
So, yeah,
17 to 20 for this current school year.
Okay,
And we're up to 40, and we hope to see that number go up actually with the change in legislation.
yeah.
okay.
And again, those are pilots, and so we'll see those. Again, our goal is by the time, in 5 years, we'll grow that substantially. But it's kind of be one of those, you know, if you double that every year, it'll grow pretty quickly. Okay, what number was I on? Number 7, right? Research best practices and case studies across the country related to closing the achievement gap. So best practice efforts continue to be aligned with the new teacher center training in secondary schools as well as ESSA planning across the district. So as they're developing their plans, that's part of it. 4 secondary schools attended the Solution Tree Response Intervention Training. Again, that's focused on best practices. And then probably most importantly and most impactfully was the hiring of our equity director. Taj has already been, I think he's been on the ground about 3 weeks and it's already come forward with some really solid ideas for next year and moving forward. And so really our biggest takeaway from that is really we need somebody focused on that full time. And so that's the number one research best practice that we're taking advantage of. And we started that this year instead of waiting until next year. Number 8, make individual contact with middle school and 9th grade students who are not involved in activities. That's systematized. That wasn't one of those one and done things. That's going to have to happen every year to make sure that we know that students who are tied to the school in some way other than academically tend to be more successful. Community engagement. Develop a set of resources for parents, guardians, and community members regarding preschool and kindergarten school readiness. Collaboration continues to the Dubuque's campaign for grade level reading to develop community resources for school readiness. Information was sent from the district to incoming kindergartners related to being prepared for school in the fall, and a broader suite of materials will be in place for the 1920 school year. So again, as we continue to develop that, it becomes part of the system, and how are we reaching out to parents earlier so that when those students, whether or not they've been to preschool, are as prepared as they can be for kindergarten, because we know a good start is imperative.
Did we skip 8?
Pardon? Did I skip one?
We did 8.
Did you?
Yep.
Okay. Must have been impressive.
I was wondering.
I'll stop taking notes.
10, define internship programs, research credit granting opportunities, and begin to outreach to community partners. Collaboration continues with NICC, Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, Dubuque Works, Dubuque Area Labor Management Council, and others related to internships. We are at a very unique point where businesses are starting to approach us in some cases. I think the tools that were provided to both of our industrial tech auto shops is an example of that, as they try to prepare for internships within the diesel mechanic industry. NICC, GDDC, Dubuque Works, Dubuque Area Labor Management, those have all been great partnerships. So there's a great motivation around that, because the unemployment rate is indicating that folks need workers, and certainly for us to tie our young people into what the possibilities are for their future and get that happening locally. So that's in the systematized category.
What do we want that to look like in a handful of years?
So in 5 years, we want all of our students, when they are with us, to have had, and let me have the, right here. So that falls really under our college career readiness piece. Increase the number of students having college career experiences, AP test, PSEO, concurrent enrollment, PIC classes, internships to 100%. So how do all of our kids have an opportunity to experience life beyond graduation, whatever that might mean for them? So that might mean again, taking a college level course, a community college level course, going into an internship. But internships shouldn't be read to mean students who are going right to work. I mean, we want internships available for our young people who think they want to be engineers and lawyers and teachers, but also those who are envisioning more of a manufacturing in their next step, or electrical work, that type of thing. So we're not going to limit it to one. I mean, we want kids to have both. I mean, it'd be great if they took an AP class, an on-campus class, and have an internship with a local employer. So our vision is that all of our students have some experience outside of our walls as to what I hate to use the word real world looks like, but technically what that is, and build those connections.
So all students.
All students. Yep.
I heard Dr. Johnson report out at the chamber meeting how, and I think Hempstead did the same thing, I saw this, that they had on the signing day, not only for sports, but they did it for a lot of things.
Yep.
And I also, we didn't put out as much publicity on it, but I saw other districts
Yep.
really put out publicity on
Yep.
that. I think that's a really,
Yep.
really good thing to do, and I really hope to see that
Yeah.
go further.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So
So we
Mike?
actually, just as a follow-up to that, have some materials that we're getting ready to share as we get to the end of the year. So about just that topic with Decision Day and that breadth of...
Decision Day, thank you.
Yeah, with the
Something.
breadth of opportunities that students are looking at, and have some great imagery to show all of the different things, not just four-year institutions, but apprenticeship programs, and some students taking a year off to get experience or to travel or those kinds of things.
Military,
So that's
Over
in the works.
military. I mean, we want to celebrate all of our students and where they're going next so that they know we support them. But it's also a great opportunity to model for the younger students coming up. Oh, look at all these different things that people 2, 3, 4 years older than me are doing. You know, I wonder which of those things I'll want to do.
But it
Just
also
get them
shows
thinking that.
what the community, who's staying around, what they're going
Sure.
into, what
Absolutely.
they're missing out on, where are our kids going after they graduate. I think that's a good visual to try to, so I'm just saying we really need to up the publicity on that when it happens. I think I saw Cedar Rapids might have promoted it a little bit higher with that, and I'm like, I think we did that.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
Is there still energy on us having our own internships and opportunities for students so that we're building our own future?
Educationally?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. We don't want, I mean, with the teacher shortage that's coming down the road, we can't miss the opportunity to get and we have students who do, what's the right word? They help with like I'm thinking my son's a junior taking the multimedia, pardon? Yeah, like a teacher aide, but they call it something, I can't remember what they call it, but anyway. So that we do have students who've had that class work, they come back and help the teacher, so just give them an idea of what it might be like to be an educator.
I think this whole drive for this is city-driven too. Our employers are looking for employees. So tapping into the schools and helping each other.
Yeah, when I go to meetings, we hosted a meeting last Thursday, the CEO Equity Committee, and you talk to the folks at those meetings, and they're all on board. I mean, I've not had one person from a large employer to small employer said, oh, we wouldn't be interested in that. They're all, so as we develop this, and of course we want to make sure we're sending them students or interns who are helpful to them, who understand what the work world is, what's expected of them. I mean, because we want to be able to continue that. So a lot of different visions of that, but one is they spend, maybe a month in class, they spend 6 weeks doing an internship, then they come back and develop maybe a personal plan about what their next steps are, where do they want to go, and get credit for that at the end of the day too. Our kids still are interested, obviously, in getting to graduation. So. Further engage parents in student learning with the launch of Seesaw. I think we've probably covered that one extensively throughout the year. Effective resource management, add improved physical security measures, ensure all classrooms have locking doors, enhanced camera systems, and implemented in-building alert systems. So the first two are done. The RAVE is ready to roll out at the beginning of next school year. The RAVE panic button, I think we've done a demonstration there, so we don't need a lot of additional conversation there. Maintain alignment with the financial targets to ensure expenditures are maximized to support strategic goals. make sure our unspent balance and make sure, obviously we're keeping our head above water financially. And obviously that's been a tightrope walk for the last 6, 7, 8 years and continues to be, but we're hanging in there, certainly better than many districts are.
Kevin's got one job.
Pardon?
Kevin's got one job,
Yep, okay, that's right.
in case he was wondering.
And Phil's involved too.
Oh, of course. Of course he.
Sorry, Phil, I didn't make you feel left out.
But it is all about Kevin, just wanted to.
Implement year 2, the Anytime Anywhere Learning Initiative. So that's been a check mark since the beginning of the school year. In other words, our freshmen and our sophomores have technology, and the teachers who do those core courses have gone through the proper pedagogy and how to utilize technology and built some of that coursework. Construction at Alta Vista campus expansion with completion anticipated during the 1920 school year, so we will be on time to open that at the beginning in the fall. And so that is where we will move the programs which are currently at Four Oaks and Hillcrest. So many of you have been by there. As they get closer to completion in July or August, we'll make an opportunity for the board to do a walkthrough and a visit at that facility.
Stan, can you speak to where we are with the program development?
So same thing. So we had 2 years ago as one of our priority initiatives, we had both the construction as well as the programming piece. So Shirley's been hard at work with that. Casey, the administrator who was brought in a year early to oversee that program, has been hard at work with that. The hiring has taken, actually the facility was built with that in mind, as well as the hiring has been done with that in mind too. So we will be fully functional with what that programming looks like for our students. Some collaboration effort with some counseling and some of those types of things with other agencies as well. So we're very confident and excited about opening that facility in the fall.
That's great.
Yeah. Employee excellence, develop coaching skills of school level teacher leaders to provide differentiated professional learning to support individual student learning. Again, we had that one was systematized on our last update. Update the district administrative organizational chart to ensure alignment of support and strategic plans. So we talked about this one, the actual organizational chart will come to subcommittee next month, but really we have talked about the need to hire an equity director, which we did. We talked about the need to hire a special education director, or really to give Shirley some semblance of a life back, because she's been doing 2 jobs for 3 years. And so through some budgeting at the building level, we've found a way to make that happen, to be budget neutral. So we will be hiring someone to take over that portion of the job with special ed. And if you remember, we talked about the third one then being needing a position to really oversee the things we've spent so much time talking about today with the college and career ready, the internship, how does that going to look? So we're not at a place where we need that position yet, or quite honestly can afford that position yet. But within the next year, we'll be coming back to say that's sort of the last leg of the stool that we need administratively. We just need to have a plan to pay for it, and so that's why that's the third of the 3 and has not yet been added to a recommendation to hire. But I'm very happy to be able to take 2 steps, because I really thought this year would only be 1. And so to be able to do 2 is good service to our kids and to our building teams. And then support 7 administrators in the School Administrators of Iowa Mentor Coaching Program. That was something new that we did this year. It was successful. The administrators who went through that program appreciated it. So some will continue on to year 2, and we'll add some more into year 1 as just sort of an ongoing opportunity for our administrators for their professional growth. Any questions about where we've been this year? And again, so if you're watching this at home, a lot of this is because we've gone through this at other meetings like this. We've talked about them at subcommittee meetings, and so largely not new learning for the board at this point. Which brings us to proposals for next year. So these as well have been through a few stages. We've pulled information from the district DSIP committee, as well as our administrators, as well as our ed programs subcommittee of the board. In some cases, the facilities support services portion of the board. So maybe I'll give you, as they're coming around, a second to read through those, and then we'll start going through them. Again, this is largely not a rough draft. It's a mature draft, but still, room for input. Though we would like to bring any changes, if necessary, back to the board soon, so that we could start the year, finish the year, knowing what the next year looks like. This is the part two where I invite the folks from the executive team to chime in as your experts on some of these in ways that we'll all become experts in the next 12 months, but we aren't today. Create an array of coursework pathways that facilitates development of a student's interest-based academic plan. So really that's work that fits in with what Mark has been doing with the graduation requirements, as well as the portrait of a student, to say, what if you're interested in technology, if you're interested in these various things, what's that pathway? What are the courses that we sort of recommend that you take, and then what are some of the electives you might want to take? If you open up a college course book, it kind of gives you, well, it's pretty spelled out what you have to take. We're not telling students what they have to take, but we're helping students, parents, mentors, neighbors, whoever sits down and has those conversations with young people, here are the classes that they're going to move you along the continuum of where you want to be. Now, of course, there are on-ramps and off-ramps, and kids can change their mind and take other things, and we want them to take a variety of things to test those out. But too often we get close to graduation, you talk to a young person, and say, well, I'm going to be an engineer. And then you look in the highest math coursework they had, it hasn't prepared them in any way, shape, or form to really pursue that without some remediation at the next level. So how do we support the parents and all the people I just mentioned, especially if that's not been their experience, if they don't know necessarily what are the courses that their sons or daughters or mentees or neighbors, grandchildren are taking. So really just to work on publicizing that, working with our course guides and those types of things to really help people understand, here's a nice sequence of courses. But again, not in a way that locks kids in so that they think, well, maybe I'm interested in this, but by the time I'm a junior, I'm interested in something else. So how do we segue from one to the other, or do both? We had conversations with the team of folks who talk about the connection between art and math, and how do those things play together. So
With this plan, is there going to be some sort of schedule that if the counselor or whoever the mentors aren't going to wait for the student to come to them, we're going to tap them certain times of the year?
So some of that
Keep them
already,
focused.
yes, and some of that already exists. I have an 8th grader, as you know, and so we recently had to, as his parents, approve his 4-year coursework plan. So we get an email online, your son has filled this out, does he know what he's talking, so there's a, those who know Jack laugh a little bit. So there's some of those things, but then how do we integrate that more systematically throughout the year? And more, or as importantly, how do we help our non-employees have that conversation? The mentors, the parents, because a guidance counselor, a teacher can do so much, but it's getting other interested adults involved in that conversation, helping them understand what's important too, so that they can have those conversations and when those key opportunities exist. We added a couple together because they're really implementations that are part of work that has already happened and the board has been brought along for number 2. So implement the new Bridges math curriculum in grades K-5 and the new preschool plan to enhance instruction of the district's earliest learners. So those plans were somewhat part of this year's priority initiatives or work that we've done with the Ed Program Subcommittee, and so now we're saying we're going to implement those plans. So we lumped a couple of them together just to say these are things that we don't want to lose track of, we want to continue to keep you up to date on, but they're things that are implementation, so we hate to put those in too many different bullets because we try really hard to keep it to less than 20 bullets, and so sometimes we combine things.
So we'll receive information about them as
Absolutely.
two separate
Yes.
implementations.
And I know that, yes, exactly, we'll continue to bring that back, but, so as you know, I should have mentioned this as we started, for those who maybe are new to this or watching at home, that this isn't everything we're going to do in the district. We do many, many things beyond this. These are just the things that we're prioritizing to report out to the board, to the community, to give updates on a regular basis. So that if I'm the parent of a 4th grader or a 10th grader, I see how the district is moving forward year after year. So as we had our strategic plan, after the first year, 7, 8, 10 years ago, we wanted to have a reporting mechanism as to what were we doing under each of those areas, and so that's where we landed on the priority initiatives. Study at-risk factors to develop programming in students in grades 7 through 10. So I know there might be some questions in regards to that range. We just grabbed that because we've got a pretty good program for grades 11 and 12. 7 and 10, middle school or high school transition is where we're seeing some additional need, but I just opened that one up to, I know at our ed program subcommittee, there's some comment about what should that be from the beginning until
I asked about that in
Up to 10.
committee because it seems that the notion of studying at-risk factors of learners is not uniquely age or grade specific.
Absolutely.
So I'm a bit still puzzled about the fact that we're still just looking at 7th through 10th graders when we know that we have so many at-risk factors and therefore concerns. Did your mic die?
My mic must be dead. Doesn't make for very good television. All you can see are lips moving.
So I'm just raising that issue again to say,
Yeah, we really had that conversation, and I think we're open to what that grade level is. It's just how do we want to get deep or do we want to get wide? And so that, I mean, I think we're pretty flexible on that. I mean, that's certainly one of the ones we would put under the draft area. I mean, if the board would rather see a study that says, you know, kindergarten through 10th grade, we can do that. It'll involve some more people. We may not get quite as far in 1 year as we would if we do 7 to 10, and then we do, you know, 3 to 6 or something like that. It's certainly our intent to touch all levels in a short period of time. It's just a matter of if we focus the effort here next year on 7-10. I think that jumped on the radar because we used to have at Central Alternative High School a 9th and 10th grade option, whereas the ALC is just for 11th and 12th graders. And so I think there's some conversation around, are we missing a little bit of programming, particularly for those first 2 years of high school? So that was just the genesis of it, but we're, again, we want to look at all of those things at some point. It's just a matter of what portion of that we take on for next year.
Yeah, in my opinion would be go deep and do it right with a smaller group, and then still with a commitment to kind of keep moving through the rest of the student population. I just think sometimes when you just try to touch it a little bit, I think that gets to be, you do kind of a okay job, and rather than just doing it right.
And if we get into this study and it really says, you know, yeah, you're talking 7 through 10, but you gotta, I mean, we could back up and come to the board and say, you know what, we need to change this one to incorporate all of middle school or 5th through, you know, this is a newer one for us, and so we chose that because it seemed like a doable, and again, we're looking at, we say a year, but really we're talking about a 9-month time frame to do a lot of this work. And so that seemed like a reasonable, but again, not outside the realm of possibility. We'd have to come back later and say, we have to adjust this.
I just think there may be some redundancy as you look at scaffolding it,
Sure.
age and grade wise. The study of at-risk factors and the programming that's needed for children at risk, I'm not sure is as discretely age and grade related as we might think that it is.
Sure.
But whatever.
Yeah. But that will be on our radar, and certainly we'll be the first to come back to the board and say, yeah, we need to look at, you know, It really starts in preschool or
Right.
however.
And to view it as the study is occurring, if it is just for grades 7 through 10, to view it as a continuous system
Absolutely.
of factors relating to a child, regardless of when they enter the system and leave the system.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly what. So we've got 11 and 12, and so we're now. But again, it's how does that whole system
Right.
play together? And not only how do you get served when needed in maybe the alternative setting, but then what's the pathway back? I mean, it is that flow. So we tend to look at all of that.
And not a piecemeal
Right.
kind of layers.
Right.
of-
Yeah, they all have to make sense from and to
Abs-
continue.
right.
Absolutely, I would agree. Enhanced gifted and talented programming utilizing recommendations from the gifted and talented program study. That's another study that is underway. It will conclude this summer or early fall. And so as that happens, we'll bring that to the board and we'll implement that. So are we serving our most gifted and talented students as effectively as we can be? So that, again, we're paying attention to the continuum of all of our students because they all need our best effort.
I really like this one right here. I know we've had a few conversations on what can we continue to do to help those kids who are striving at a high rate. So I really like this one.
Absolutely. And are there kids we're missing?
Yeah.
You know, it goes everywhere. There's, you know. Number 5, leverage school-level areas of excellence and equity innovation initiatives to create best practice exchanges that foster information sharing, additional learning, and mutual support. Really, that was one that Taj brought forward, and he's not here today. He's at a training, but just really getting his arms around what is it that we're currently doing, what's working well, how do we replicate that, how do we give buildings opportunities to collaborate and work together. So it's just our next step on what we're doing to ensure, because there's no sense reinventing the wheel. We have some really bright spots in some of our buildings, and so how do we push that and leverage that opportunity? Number 6, develop a portrait of an educator aligned with the district's portrait of a graduate. So you heard me talk about the work that was done with the portrait of a graduate, primarily done by with Mark and his team. And now what do the teachers need to do to get us to that end? What do the teachers need to do? And that's not a 9-12 thing. That's a pre-K 12 thing. And we often talk about, you know, we'll know where we know we're getting close to where we need to be when we start seeing the kindergarten and first grade teachers show up at graduation, right? Because they see how closely they're tied to the work, how their work is tied to the student graduating. That supports and advances an educational experience in which students are encouraged in their own learning through a variety of styles. Did I read that whole thing? That supports and advances an educational experience in which students are engaged. I think engaged is a key word there. In their own learning through a variety of styles. Project-based learning, which we've talked about, inquiry-based learning, explicit instruction, collaboration. So what is it that we need teachers to do to engage our students in an active learning environment?
What I'm especially interested with that one, and for those not at committee meetings, we've talked about this one a number of times in committee. I think there's a common understanding that we're looking to actively engage our students in their learning. That list concerns me in terms of the difference between a way of teaching and a strategy of teaching. Inquiry-based, for example, is a structure. It's not a pervasive way of looking at teaching and learning. What I'm not interested in is, so we say, now and then, let's do something where children are really actively engaged.
Right.
What I'm looking for is where our way of teaching, and therefore our students' way of learning, is about active engagement, every classroom, every teacher, every child, all the time. And that takes a tremendous amount of professional learning. It takes a district-wide effort, I think, of a substantial initiative that, to me, that would be as high a priority as I would see in our list. And so I only raise that to say I'm not sure in the language of that I see that written as a profound initiative that really seeks to have that be pervasive, common way our students learn. They walk into the classroom, it isn't, oh, today we're going to do something of active engagement. No, today is another day where, again, my learning is going to be through active engagement. And so I only cite that as a way of saying I think the writing of that, the language of that, could speak to either of those paths. And I'm not interested in a now and then kind of active engagement activity. And that may not be the intent
Sure.
of it.
Yeah, certainly not the intent. We want our students engaged, in every class, every day. And how they do that, certainly project-based is part of that, a significant part of that. Inquiry-based, and that's really something the state is putting a lot of their professional development on. Explicit instruction, and sometimes there are opportunities to, or not necessities to teach when you're teaching reading at an early age, to be very explicit in what that instruction is. But how do we do that in a way that is actively engaging the student? Because there's going to be times we just have to do that. I do think that our, so it is, I envision where students are never bored. Now that's a big vision, but that's we need 11,000 students coming every single day feeling actively engaged in their learning and in their classroom. And really, I would agree with you in many ways. It supersedes why are we doing number 1? Why are we doing number 3? Why are we doing number 4? Because we want those kids to have opportunities to, wherever they're at, to be actively engaged in their learning. Nothing bothers me more than when one of my children come home and, how was your day? And they tell me it was boring. Shouldn't be boring. Part of that's teenagers, but really it should not be boring to them. They should be actively engaged in what's happening at school. I think that can take a variety. I do also worry a little bit about our students down the road, and we shouldn't, because poor teaching exists at the next level in some cases, we shouldn't change the way we teach, but I do worry about our students who go off and spend their freshman year in a 900 student chemistry class and they're lectured at all day, and it's all based on this final. I want them to have the skills to survive that. Again, I don't want to change our instruction to say that's okay, but part of me is torn to know that that's the practical experience some of these students are going to have. And so how do we help them be able to survive in a variety of different ways, though, again, not saying that that's okay for our staff. Does that make sense? Because really that's the experience many of our students will have the year after graduation. I'm living that experience, and it's not, it's just the survival skill. So I really want our students to experience a whole range of educational experiences, all of which, though, are actively engaged in them. And many of them are project-based, inquiry-based, real-world-based. So again, the internship, to the extent an internship is project-based, to me, that's exactly what we're trying to get to.
So when you say you're going to develop a portrait of a graduate and then the portrait of an educator, is that going to be something that will be able to be defined then?
Yes, in fact, the portrait of an educator is very well defined, a graduate, sorry. And we can share that. Have we shared that? I think we shared bits and pieces early on, but that committee just finalized his work last week. Okay. They made a presentation to me, and so we'll invite them to our next meeting too, to say this is what we're, and I think that will help you see what we're really
that'll
aiming
define
at.
The action items of what's going to happen.
Yeah. But Nancy, I don't want anybody in the district to ever hear me say it's okay to be not engage your students. They need to be engaged in every class period. The pedagogy, the teaching styles has to enforce that, and we have some really great teachers who actively engage their students through the Socratic method.
That's right.
That create dialogue and conversation and get kids, young people to think differently and express opinions.
The Madeline Hunter process. That. Yeah.
But I agree with you 110%. We have to. That really does. If we did that every day for every student, a lot of these other goals wouldn't be necessary.
That's exactly right. And
truly.
And we can't control what happens after 12th grade.
We can't.
If it's not the right thing, shame on them. But I think that higher education is also looking at this issue and trying to grapple with it in their own ways and pace. But we cannot have a child look at us and say, I can't sit that long anymore.
Absolutely.
No. And it isn't Thursday and therefore we're going to do inquiry.
Yep.
Or it isn't this project and we're going to do
Yep.
collaboration or whatever. It's a way of life.
Absolutely.
in the classroom.
So to the extent that this bullet does or doesn't reach that,
I think it does.
I think it does. I don't,
it's going to be the accountability you hold us to when we report out.
right, absolutely.
I think defining the portrait of an educator that aligns with the portrait of the graduate is really is going to make it very defining, not only for us, but for the the parents and the teachers and the students to know, it's like, my teacher's not doing this. My teacher is not doing this, and then they'll be able to say, why aren't we doing this when this is what you're supposed to be doing for my education, or the parents to be able to say that. So I think that first sentence alone helps support everything else in it. So I think it's well done.
None of this succeeds without the principal or the primary evaluator ensuring that kind of teaching goes on in the classroom. And
Yep.
I'm not convinced that we still don't have some work to do there in that area.
Absolutely.
And so we can put whatever we want to on a piece of paper, but if staff is not managed, and I think we're better than we are bad, don't get me wrong, but we need to make sure that is hammered down by the evaluation process to make sure that the best teaching is occurring.
Absolutely. Number 7, increase the number of students taking the ACT with the focus on underrepresented groups and gather baseline data on students taking the AccuPlacer exam. So AccuPlacer is the exam, or one of the exams that is taken when you go to NICC to help you understand what classwork you should take. So it's not an entrance exam, it's a placement exam. And so why are we looking at this? We're not looking at growing the score, we're just trying to, it's one of the measures we're using to make sure that we're getting, again, to our college and career readiness. Are students thinking about their future? Are they taking the appropriate tests to let them know where they might have access to go to school, or where their skill set is, or what those desires might be. So there is some research around that. So currently about 61% of our graduates take the ACT, and then that's broken down more females than males take that exam. I'm trying to find that data point. No, that's not right. That's not right. Oh yeah, okay, 59% of our male graduates. That can't be right though. Anyway, we're looking at that data. We know about 60% of our students take that data. We know 41% of our African American students take the ACT. 13% of our Marshallese students take it. 61.8% of our graduates who 2 or more races. So this is all self-reported. And 20 of our students who took the ACT didn't mark that because it's not mandatory on the ACT test. So we're just looking at who's taking it, who's not taking, what barriers exist. I don't think we're at a point where we want to say 100% of our students should take the ACT, but we might want to get to a point where we say, all juniors who arrive at on track for graduation at the end of their junior year should have an opportunity to take the ACT. And what are the barriers for those who don't? Is it financial? Is it, do they not know that they should or could? I don't want this to ever be misinterpreted as us saying that 95% of our students should go to college. We're not saying that. We're saying that our students should be college and career ready. And one example that they're preparing in their mind of what their future is that they're taking exams like the ACT, like the AccuPlacer. We also, if you go back to the strategic plan, call out things like the ASVAB, which is the military placement test. So a whole range of things that we'll look at over the course of 5 years to make sure that we are providing our students with guidance and help in looking at what the future might be for them. And there is some research that students who take those types of exams think differently about what all of their options are in the future. So that's why we're tracking the percent of the students taking it, not the actual grade. As it happens, our grade is about 1.5 points above the state average, which is a point above the national average. So the students who take it from Dubuque Community School District are very successful. We just would like a few more students, or all students who would like to take it or should take it, have that opportunity. It's not about us pushing college. It's about us pushing students thinking about their future. Okay, provide professional learning to enhance lesson planning to move from a focus on assessing the standards to focus on teaching and learning the standards. I think that kind of goes back to the conversation we just had. We developed a standards-based report card, and so now our teachers, our elementary teachers, are experts on those standards. Now we need to help them with the pedagogy of making sure, how do I teach those standards the best? Actively engaging the students, combining standards where appropriate, but how do we take that next? It's a logical next place to be from the standards-based report card. Okay. Community engagement, analyze data related to students open enrolling to another district and develop an action plan based on this analysis. We have about 200 students who choose to leave Dubuque Community School District to be educated in the surrounding school. And we'd like to know why that is and what can we do to offer those experiences that they see here. Sometimes it's just a matter of where mom and dad went to school or a variety of things, but there are maybe some things that we can do to lower that number because we know the great things that happen in our district, and we also know that once students start with us, they stay with us. Most of those open enrollments happen early in their education, not after they've been with us for a while.
Plus, all the kids that go to the parochial system. So if we take all of those students in sum, multiply it by $6,600.
In that ballpark, 67, I think, these days.
Probably up to 69 is close.
It is crystal clear that we are competing for enrollment and money that supports our program. So hence, one of the reasons why I feel so strongly that we need to make sure that we are reaching every kid as best we can. Because we simply need the, what do they say in Animal House? Hey, we need the dues. we need that revenue to support the entire program, and it's the right thing to do. So if we think that those competitive pressures are going to alleviate, I think I don't hear anybody saying that,
Right.
But I think we're wrong. I think we need to take heed of the fact that there are more than ever alternatives out there to coming to just your own community school district, So we want to be aware of that and make sure that the product stays sharp and edgy for everybody.
Absolutely. Streamline and broaden efforts to translate key district documents focused on Spanish and Marshallese to better serve non-English-speaking families. So that process has begun, especially with Spanish. Marshallese represents a little bit more of a challenge because it's not a widely spoken language outside of a handful of communities in the United States, of which Dubuque is proud to be one. So how do we make sure that we're communicating effectively with our students? I know some of you have an awards program at senior high that you need to get to for your daughters. So
Still trying to get into
good luck.
the National Honor Society. I'm going to complain if they don't nominate me.
I'll wait.
I'll straighten this out.
If my phone rings, I'll know what it's about. Thank you. Building a foundation for a data dashboard that allows for the connection to and tracking of college career-ready experiences with each student. So this goes back to your comment or question earlier, Lisa, is how do we track that? How do we create it on a dashboard so that, again, not only do we know that, do the students understand that they've had one of those experiences or not, but do those folks, those interested adults in their lives also have access to, sort of what are those check marks so they can have those conversations? And if they haven't, what are those things that are available? So it is all about communication, and we talk a lot about those, dinner conversations and that sort of stuff. Not every child is fortunate enough to have that, so how do we help spread that data so that the people who do have that connection can have those conversations? Create enhanced college and career opportunities through development of an information technology pathway program in collaboration with Northeast Iowa Community College. So here's, this document jumps around a little bit from the general to the specific. Here's a very specific pathway that we are in the process of creating in connection with NICC specifically, but also some other GEC, other players in the room, about a young person who says, I know I want to get into IT. And what are the classes I should take in high school, and how does that translate into where I can be? Some of those are concurrent enrollment, and then I can take this next set of classes at NICC, and then I'll have this IT degree that I seek. And there's some ways that we're trying to find, NICC is working with how that might be paid for to make it very inexpensive for our young people. So again, it's one pathway. If that's how we're going to solve this, right, it's going to be by creating many different pathways for students, and the very specific one next year is with the IT sector. And we're hearing from employers that that's important to them too. So obviously we're trying to create a win-win there. Revise the district facility plan to maximize additional infrastructure and technology funding available through the Secure and Advanced Vision Education 1-cent sales tax. So we'll have some conversations around that. Tim Oswald is putting together some data on that. I do want to caution that just because the sales tax was extended, with our current projects that are underway, with the cost of some of those projects, it may not be as much as soon as we had initially hoped that it would be. But we'll have that conversation when we have the details. I just know that some of the debt requirements and those sorts of things we don't. Likely over the course of that 20-year extension, we get about $9.5 million a year. You can do the math. It's $180 million. That doesn't mean we're going to have access to that $180 million right away.
The governor hasn't signed that yet.
It has not been signed yet either, so we don't know that it's really.
Is there a deadline? Is the deadline next? I heard the deadline's next week or
Yeah,
this week.
it's coming.
End
So
of this
there's,
week.
and again, then we
Yeah.
put that
This
on there
week?
on
I thought it was
the
this week.
I thought it was
on the
too.
anticipation it would be signed, but yeah, you're right, it has not been signed yet.
What happens if it doesn't get signed? Does it go back to
Then
all the
we're back
process?
in the, well, I mean, it could, yeah.
I mean, I haven't even heard any talk of it, of her signing it. You hear all these other ones anticipated signing.
She tries to stage them.
Well, I
Yeah,
get it,
she's on
but-
the record as being supportive, so
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if she
Well,
doesn't. But
Oh, no, she just didn't sign it right away.
I know.
it's all about the photo op, I don't know.
I'm sure.
You gotta wait till Alec can get out there with her camera before they can sign it. So we're gonna pay DTH. Oh, okay, where was I at? Bring the high schools to a full one-to-one computing environment by issuing anytime, anywhere initiative laptops to both 9th and 12th grade. So you heard me mention that this year we had year 2 where it was added to, so now it's 9th and 10th grade. So then next year, the idea would be that there'll only be one grade, which would be the seniors who didn't have the one-to-one. Many of our seniors take classes with juniors, puts a stress on our faculty because they've designed coursework for use of the technology. So through good buying habits and great negotiations by Colby, we have the dollars available to add both years next year so that all students at the high school will be a one-to-one. And more importantly, or as importantly, the staff will be trained up to be able to effectively utilize that technology in their classroom.
Well, this is off top. I'll connect a little bit. Will students have access to their plans on their laptop, and will also counselors have access to that?
So for the dashboard piece that we're talking about, or the 4-year plan, yeah, all of that is web-based, and so they have access to that at any time.
With the counselor as well? 'Cause I'm trying to think like those
Counselors-
kids whose either parents are not too engaged with the district, or maybe they're not engaged, like who's going to keep these kids on track?
Well, so it's all of the above,
Yeah.
but it's also then you've heard me talk about needing that third position, so that's why we need somebody who kind of really oversees all of those pieces, the college career ready, all of those things, and we'll be in a position where I need to find the funding for that position by this time next year for sure.
And mentors need to be able to.
Yeah.
Sure,
have access
absolutely.
to
We
that
don't
as
want to
well.
keep that, anybody that the student wants to give permission to view that.
Yeah. But we need to
But
let the students know, hey, share this with your.
And we also need to train up the mentors, right? So
Right,
think about the Black
right.
Men's Coalition or the other groups and say, okay, how do we pull them in for an hour of training and say, this is what this means, this is how you access it, this is the permission we would need from the student to give it to you, whatever, but then what are the coaching strategies? What does this data tell you that they have done or haven't done or could do?
Because it's a
differently?
pathway that needs to be looked at several times a year.
Sure, it can change with the
Yeah, it
interests
can
of the kids,
change,
it can
but-
change with the maturity of the students, there's a lot of things that change that.
But to just dump it on counselors is not. the
can't-
effective
No,
way
'cause
to
they
do
wouldn't
it.
have
That's
the
not realistic
resources,
if they're
right?
No,
Yeah.
it can't. So it
Talk
has
to
to go
those
outside the
We
school.
have a 300 and something to 1 ratio for our counselors at the high school, so,
Yeah.
but they can play a role, but it's not, certainly
No.
not
Right.
the sole role for them. Where was was I at?
15.
15.
15, thank you. Ensure alignment with the financial targets to ensure expenditures are maximized to support strategic goals. That sounds
Kevin.
really familiar.
He just
This
won't
year it's
go
going to be
away.
Phil.
We're gonna systematize that one and not bring it up, but maybe we will. Kevin just wants to keep me in track for sure. Fully implement Rave Panic Button, building alert system, and train staff on its use. Again, we get granular there for a second to say this is something that's going to be available. So if, should there be an emergency, it's all about communication and timing, and we see that over and over again, unfortunately, when there's an issue. The quicker it's called out, the quicker people can respond, the better training that the minimizes the impact of that event. So this is going to be a good step forward to us. Play excellence, implement advanced intensive professional development for administrators and elementary teachers through a differentiated workshop-based approach based on identified needs. So we have talked about, so the intent of that one is at the beginning of the school year, we have new staff, and in some case old staff, administrators, teachers who maybe they missed the training. So we have new principals who need budgeting training. We have newer teachers who need Seesaw or Imagine It training. And so to offer on that one day, and so we can change that bullet, because I think I do agree that that has to be sort of that one day for teachers, for administrators to say, this is what I need, some choice on that day to kind of get me up to speed with my peers, because I was hired after that training was done, or I really didn't quite get this whole Infinite Campus thing, and so I need to go to that training. But then that's not the intent of the overall training of the year. Then we'll have individual building focuses and district focuses for the majority of the training thereout. So it's one day, I believe it's July 30 for administrators. What was it? What's it? It's July 31st for administrators, and then one of the days when teachers come back. Does anybody know? 16th of August. But that's just kind of a, teachers know, but also principals can be self-directive, like, oh, you missed this, so I need you to go to this and go to that. So it's not just to, show up at the convention center and sit through the meetings you're interested in, but those are things that they've asked for, or the administrators have asked for, the target specific things that, okay, I missed this, or I missed that, or I was hired after this, and so I can go here and I can spend this 1 or 2 hour block and hear about it from the experts. Many of the times there'll be teachers doing it, or other principals for principals, or Kevin talking about budgets, or whoever, so that we just kind of get that base mindset. But then as we start the school year, have a more focused approach at the building and district level around what PD is. Let's see, 18, take the next step in improving teacher practice through coaching conversations by systematizing the development and continuing learning of instructional coach mentors. Again, one of the ways we help our teachers grow is through mentors and instructional coaches, and so continuing to help them understand best pedagogy so they can bring that back to their teams of teachers. And we've been doing variations of that now for, well, really since we had the teacher leadership grant, and it pays dividends. Those one-on-one or small group relationships what are helping move us forward. And then research best practices and develop a plan to maximize the impact of the paraprofessional employee group on student learning. We have over 400, almost 460 paraprofessionals. What is the professional development that they receive? What are the specific job embedded types of experiences that they need to have? I mean, that is a significant investment on behalf of the district. And so it's also a widest ranging group of folks. And so we want to make sure that we are giving them the professional development to be successful, not only because that's good for kids, but we believe it'll drive job stability. They'll be more likely to stay with us for the long term because they feel valued. Not that we don't do some of those things already, but we want to be very specific. It's been a few years since that has been looked at. There was, I lose track of time, 7, 8 years ago. Maybe we did some of this work and then we've kind of moved away from that with other focuses. So it's time for us to get back at looking at how we onboard and develop our paraprofessionals. They're our second largest group by far. 980 teachers and about half that many paraprofessionals. And they're one-on-one or small groups. They impact the lives of our kids every single day. So it makes sense to invest in their growth as well. Again, this is not meant to be everything we're going to do as a district. It just means that these are the things that we're going to pay specific attention to, and we're continue to report out to the board and to the community. There are many other things that we do. Some of these things are next steps in enhancing things. Some things are very granular and specific, and some are more broad and overarching of the district.
Well, I appreciate you doing it now as opposed to us hearing about it in October.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it gives us, I know it's a lot of work on your part, but your planning's already beginning anyway.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
in order for us to all be on the same page moving forward and knowing what it's going to be, I think it takes, hopefully you'll be able to get off to the new year without backtracking.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's some good things that are going to happen. I really like the idea of the portrait of the educator coming out of the I think that, to me, is the biggest standout out of all of this, because that really defines everything. Quite frankly, defines absolutely everything that we do. And then I would even, hopefully, the next year you could develop it in the portrait of a paraprofessional. What does that mean?
Sure.
Because I think that is even defined in and of itself when you have so many, and they need an identity of what it means to be a good paraprofessional too.
And it's also good for our teaching staff to understand what the role of the para is.
Absolutely.
And how they best utilize the paraprofessionals when they're in their classrooms.
That's
maybe,
a good
with their
idea.
students.
maybe parallel it along as it develops as what it looks like, and not wait too long. Just
Well,
if you're going to
19
start doing this.
Yeah, 19 will begin that process
Yeah.
and move us into that realm for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that, after a few of my visits with a lot of the schools, seems like a common theme in all the building is brain health and the trauma
Yep.
that a lot of the kids face. I know we're doing a lot of great things in a lot of our school buildings. Do we need to do a study on what are some of the challenges, or do we know what are the increased challenges that kids are facing that we can best support the students? Because a common thing that I hear from my teachers, I'm not prepared to deal with this blah.
Kids are going
Right.
through this certain trauma. So really that falls pretty squarely into Shirley's world.
But I know it's increasing from what I'm hearing.
A couple things. The state has passed legislation a year ago, and it kicks in July 1st. All teachers will be expected to take a 1-hour course, an online module this upcoming year. And that gets a little bit into the brain health. And another thing that's happening through legislation in the state of Iowa is AEAs are training staff members across the state this year, this summer. And it's on mental health first aid, which is getting a lot into that brain health. I am in the process of identifying 2 of our counselors that will go get, it's 3-day training, some intensive training this summer. So we are scaling up to do some of that work, but we're just at the tip of that iceberg.
But they're not wrong. That's a very specific need
Absolutely.
for anyone who.
I serve on the Keystone AEA board, and we just had a board meeting this afternoon, and they were sharing the plan for doing what you're saying, Shirley, in terms of training trainers and getting school district faculties involved in that mental health first aid training. Is that what it's called? It's a pretty extensive training from the sounds of it. 8 hours?
3 days.
8 hours, yeah. It's a little bit of money the state has out. 2.1 million sounds like a lot of money.
Spread that around.
But spread that around, and it's so, but it's a start, and it addresses a gaping hole, I think, in terms of what we're prepared to deal with, as you're citing, Anderson. What do I do with this kid who?
Has experienced these things,
Experience,
and I
yeah.
can't relate to that.
Right.
Or how can I relate to that?
That's right. That's great.
All right. Any other items? All right.
That's all.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.